Welcome to Campus to Contracts. I am your host, Brendan. Joining me yet again is Mason Williams. Mason, what do you have in store for this wonderful episode that we get to dive into?
Well, I believe this episode, we're going to be talking about my college career, how it pertains to me and my company and what I learned along the way, what I would change, and what, according to the rules now, I recommend you guys doing.
And so for a lot of parents out there, kids are trying to get ready to go to college. It's always a stressful time. It's stressful for many, many, many reasons. The cost, the decisions. But now you got an adult. You got all these deals going on in college. Everyone reads about them. Everyone gets excited. You went in at a different time. However, your pathway to college, you just signed this deal. You're going to UPenn. You're super stoked about it. And why don't you just walk us through what that first experience was for you?
Yeah, going to University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League school. Side note, we are going to have a special on just Ivy League schools and those rules because they are completely different than your standard Division I FCS or FBS university. But I was very excited. Going to an Ivy League school, I thought that I couldn't do any better academically. And I felt that it was a great opportunity for me athletically to get on the field as soon as possible and showcase the type of player I was.
When you're showcasing the type of player that you are in this university, you wanted to be challenged academically, which obviously you're not picking an easy school. And the differences are very astronomical in reference to that. But then also as the coaching staff, what was about the coaching staff for you that really kind of sealed the deal when you were looking at the universities?
So if you guys go back to some of our episodes, we tell you what to look at when you're looking at a coaching staff. We tell you what to look at when looking at a school, and we tell you what to look at when you choose a football program. I actually did go through all of these things with the help of my mother and my father, of course. So when it came to the football staff, the one thing that I really liked was first, it was a new head coach. The head coach was there for 42 years, but he was not the head coach. This was his first time being the head coach. Because it was his first time being the head coach, he was able to hire a new coaching staff, one of which was the defensive coordinator. The defensive coordinator, it was his first year there, hasn't had a season yet. So it was a brand new defensive coordinator, brand new defensive scheme. And that was important to me because that means that he was going to look at the roster with a fresh set of eyes. He told me that he was going to give me a chance to start as a freshman, and he had a history of playing freshmen. So I thought that was very attractive for my on-field career. Also, the defensive coordinator was also going to be my position coach. So when I told you guys to look at your position coach, your defense, your coordinating coach, and your head coach, and your special teams and strength and conditioning coaches, I was able to have the position coach and the defensive coordinator be the same person. So I was doing two birds with one stone. Not a lot of miscommunication there for me from a player's standpoint, and I'd know exactly what the defensive coordinator and the defensive back coach would want because it was going to be the same person. So that was very important for me to choose based on the staff.
And I'm going to dive into this from a company perspective, which is where my experience lies. Communication is one of the key components to anything, good decision-making, good meetings, good dialogue, making sure everyone's involved. When you're looking at it from a coaching staff, what a lot of kids don't understand is what you just stated. Having the defensive coordinator also be that position coach is key because then you don't have to worry about someone having to speak up for you to the defensive coordinator. You also have that person is watching out for you and seeing what's best for their defense. And the other thing that I really liked what you said is about playing freshman year. A lot of coaches say things like you can compete or you can play or you could have X, Y, or Z. But to have that commitment from the coach who's been there a long time that you can play freshman year, that's what you were looking for. That's what you really desired. And so knowing what you want, a lot of kids want to compete for it, which is great to get that opportunity as well. But being able to deliver on that promise, was that something they were able to do, or is that something that you found that they ended up being short on?
Well, they only promised that I'd have a chance to compete for it. And that promise they absolutely gave me. They stuck to it. They did not fall short whatsoever. I ended up starting the very first game as a true freshman. That was because I played well throughout the summer while I was there, and I proved to them that they could trust me on the field, and I knew everything I needed to know going into that first game. Along the way, there was some luck that was involved, as all players know. And I was very fortunate enough to start as a freshman. But that was one of the key things that really drove me to that school as a football program, because I had the ability to compete and start as a freshman. Whereas some of the other schools who also told the truth were like, hey, look, you're probably not going to play as a freshman. You're probably not going to start as a freshman, but that spot will be open for you next year. And though I appreciated the honesty, I wanted to play as soon as possible. And again, we'll get into the reasons why in the Ivy League special, because that plays a huge role in wanting to play early, especially in the Ivy League.
And another point on that is when the coach is able to deliver on that expectation, that has to make you feel like $1 million, because a lot of kids do have those bad experiences. And with social media out there and these platforms for kids to communicate on, I'm sure a lot of kids that you went to high school with were talking about their experiences as they went into the next level. Being able to say, hey, they're delivering on their promises. Is there any communication back and forth with some of the ex-teammates about how their college experiences are going?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So many different universities, so many different coaches have so many different types of communication. And honestly, I could have just been lucky that the coaches were honest with me and actually honest about their honesty, because a lot of times many things change. As an agent now, when I have kids going from high school to college, there are guys that are signing colleges, and a week later their head coach leaves to another school. So nowadays it's very hard to trust those type of words, and that's why you got to go back and go to the reasons why we say the reasons that you should look at universities and football programs. Because when I was going, there wasn't much change going on. Coaches weren't just leaving as soon as they signed players as often as they are now. Coaches weren't getting bought out of their deals, and there wasn't as much social media involved. When I talked to some of my teammates, there was a couple that went to bigger schools, and they didn't play as soon as I did, but they also went to bigger schools. So that could have been a reason. Maybe the talent was richer, maybe it wasn't. Maybe they weren't performing as well, maybe they were. And for some reason, there were some more political intricacies that were stopping them from playing as soon as possible. But everyone knew in my class, and even in my younger class who played with my younger brother, that I was starting as a freshman. And even some of the players that I played with that were older than me, that I worked out with on my club team, we stayed in communication as well, and they saw me thriving at such a young age in college football.
Yeah, it's definitely a different dynamic, and I think the biggest thing, for the kids that you're helping, and for you as a parent as you're helping your kid, you really cannot count on the words of these coaches. You don't want to have a freshman letdown. You don't want to feel like you were deceived. There's nothing worse as a young person to feel like you were misled, and then you show up to a program and you just feel like the carpet's been just pulled out from underneath your feet. It takes away your desire. It takes away what you want out of your life. And it's really, really, really difficult for, your growth as a human being, your growth as a player. And I think a lot of players end up struggling in that.
Yeah. And growth as a player was, extremely critical in my decision-making once I got to college and through college. Fast forwarding, my freshman year was not particularly great. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't like outstanding, or, I was kind of just like there. As a sophomore, however, I completely changed everything. I got bigger, I got faster, I got stronger, I got way better. I led the nation in picks. I was an All-American. I was first team All-Ivy. A lot of things changed for me that sophomore year. Focusing on myself and my development in the summer and in the spring going into my sophomore year was without a doubt the most important thing that I did in my college career.
I'm gonna back you up to your freshman year. When you say your freshman year, you were just there. Talk about what it was like your freshman year, because a lot of kids do feel like they're just shell shocked, or they're just like artwork. They're just there. What did that feel like, that experience? Because you went from you're starting, you're playing, you're the guy in high school to now you're just back to square one again. What was that like?
Well, I was starting. I started every single game as a freshman. I started every single game while I was at Penn. But I wasn't the best player on the team. I wasn't even the best player on defense. I probably wasn't even the 20th best player on the team. You know, like I was just a role player. I was there. I didn't make mistakes, but I didn't actually change the game, if that makes sense. I did my best. I was 5'10", 160 pounds every game. So I wasn't huge. I wasn't big. I wasn't that strong. But I had very good IQ. I didn't make a lot of mistakes. I didn't make any mistakes. And that was kind of what held me down, just being part of a really good defense. We still won the Ivy League championship that year. I was part of a really good defense, a really good team. We had really good offensive players. And my job wasn't so much as to change the game. It was to just be a role player. That's what I was as a freshman. I couldn't have been more happy about that because I played every single game. There's a lot of guys who go through that shock that were starters on their high school team to not playing a single down an entire season. Not because they weren't redshirting, but just because they weren't good enough to play or one of the most predominant players on the team. So I didn't have to go through that, fortunately for myself. So I was very happy to be on the team. I was happy to be a starter, but I wasn't changing the game. So when I say I was just there, I wasn't changing the game. I wasn't someone where, oh, that's Mason. He's out there making plays. I didn't make a lot of plays. I didn't. I was on the team. I was a starter. I wasn't making mistakes, and I was a good role player.
Did you experience your freshman year as you get along with bigger talent? Did you kind of see what it would take to make the plays? Did you kind of see like you have to take your game to another level? Because I always see with athletes, when you put them with other athletes who are better or further along, they either rise or fall depending on what they see. And you want the kids that rise up. And obviously freshman kids, you want to see them start to take their game and everything more serious. Is that what you saw in yourself?
I became more serious. And I'll say the biggest thing to your point was the physical aspect, the tackling. What we've talked about in our episodes of tackling and getting physically comfortable. That's the biggest thing that changes from high school to college. You're playing way bigger guys. You're playing 4 or 5 year older guys. And these are grown men who have put on 5 years of lifting, real lifting. Getting on that field when I was, 18 years old and 160 pounds, I wasn't scared to be on the field. Not at all. Was not timid or shy. But I did recognize as the season went on what I needed to do to make an impact, a bigger impact than I was making, because that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the best player I could be, and honestly, I wanted to be the best player on the field. But in order to be the best player on the field, I needed to change a couple things about myself. I needed to increase my intensity. I needed to get more gritty. I needed to become a more dominant player in my own way. And that simply was getting bigger, getting faster, getting stronger, because I had the ability and I wasn't scared to tackle or make the necessary plays. That's why it's so important to start tackling before you get into high school, because by the time I was a senior in high school, it didn't matter the type of players that you put around me. I was comfortable fully with how to handle every single situation. That's how it was in college. Yes, the players are faster. Yes, the players are stronger. But you understand what it takes in every scenario, even if you haven't ran into it before, on how to tackle certain players and how to handle yourself physically. Because if you think about it, the first time you ever play a player on another team is that game. You don't get to practice against them. You get to practice against your own teammates. And sometimes you get so comfortable practicing against your own teammates that could be bigger, faster, stronger than the guy you're going to play in the game, but they're just different. They don't play the same way as that guy that you're going to play on Saturday or Sunday. So you're going to have to learn how to adapt on the fly within 1 to 2 possessions. You're going to have to learn how to physically understand what's going on with this player that's in front of me or these players that I've been encountering during the game. Me growing into my sophomore year was understanding how much quicker I needed to get that system going that adaptation, kind of like how Floyd Mayweather says, I don't have a game plan until round 4, 5, or 6. I needed to move that up to round 2 or 3 because I didn't have 12 rounds. I had 4 quarters, and I was only on the field half the time.
And I think that's one of the keys in football that a lot of other sports don't have. You play one time against this team. You don't play 4. You don't play 2. You don't have a weekend. You play one game. And if you don't figure it out by the second quarter, by the second half, that game's lost.
Yeah.
There is no recovery. So I find football very interesting because of that kind of one and done nature. And to your point, like you can practice against the same guys. It's why that scout team is so important, to try to mimic the players, to try to mimic what they do to get you ready for that team. And it's so important to have someone who mimics that player, for instance, and so on. So as we wrap up the freshman year, and you said some key points to your sophomore year, the end of your freshman football season, when you're focused on the off season, what are the biggest things that you took away from the season to the off season that were very different than high school senior year?
From senior year of high school, I realized I was a player that other players could rely on. As a freshman in college, I was not that player. I was relying on other players, better players, to help the team move forward. Going into my sophomore year, I wanted to be, once again, that player that other players relied on. I wanted to be a predominant player. I didn't want to wait until junior year. I didn't want to wait until senior year. I wanted it to be right now. But I knew I needed to prepare myself for that role. There was no other person, no strength coach, no defensive coordinator, nobody but myself who could prepare me for that role, to be that player. I had to be in tip-top shape. I had to be physically ready. I had to grow physically. I had to be stronger to handle things more. I had to gain weight, which I did. I needed to do a lot of things that would put me in the position to hopefully become that player. And I focused a lot on spring ball, on becoming that player, growing within the system with that coach. I developed a very strong relationship with my defensive coordinator / defensive back coach, which was another key thing. You know, instead of having 2 separate coaches for those positions, I had one. So, you know, whenever you add an extra person to the conversation, you're upping the possibility of a distortion of the communication. When it's just 2 people, that's as close to 100% as you're ever going to get. So when me and my defensive coordinator started to grow within his scheme, I started to learn him. He started to learn me. We had perfect communication. He told me what he wanted, and I told him what I felt was working and what wasn't working, and he would listen, and he would be open to my suggestions as I grew within the system, along with some of my other teammates, because we wanted to win another championship, which we ended up doing. We won 2 back-to-back Ivy League championships, and that was solely because our communication as a group, as a defense, we were able to grow within that system. And me personally, I became a much better player as soon as I began to trust my coach, to trust my teammates, and to grow myself within the system. Keeping in mind the personal goals that I had, I wanted to be that predominant player. I began to do extra things outside of my time with the team.
And that inner drive that you have, and again, a lot of kids are like, where you get that and you've developed that over time. And when you have those challenges, like every athlete does, every student athlete, they all have these challenges. You have to find that inner spirit to take your game to another level. And you saw what you were capable of, but also what you could be if you really focused and really honed in on your skills. So again, thanks for taking us through your freshman year of college, and also just kind of showing how the improvement from freshman to sophomore year, how big that is. And a lot of kids out there, they may be struggling in their freshman year, or they may have had a tough freshman year and they're feeling really down, or, man, I don't know if I can make it to that level. And just, again, communicate with your coaches, communicate with the people that are really good. Ask them how they got to where they are. A lot of the things I've experienced in my life is the kids that are good and the coaches that are great are going to want to work with you, because your success is their success. So Mason, I can't thank you enough as you walk us down this road of your memories and this road of your path to where you ended up being the future the agency that you grew and the agency you are growing to all of this career experience that you have, that you can share this with so many talented individuals to really make the most of their future endeavors. So thank you so much for giving us your time again and for sharing your stories. I can't thank you enough. And thanks for checking in Campus Contracts.
Of course.
Thanks for watching Campus to Contracts. I appreciate you tuning in.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Brandon, thank you, everybody. Catch you next episode on Campus Contracts.